Hey, this is Deconversion Therapy, and I'm solo. Your dearest Bonnie isn't here. She's in South Florida making out with Ron DeSantis, probably. But I have someone else, and I'm really excited that my parasocial friend Teddy Hose is here. Hey, Teddy.
Hello. Nice to meet you for the first time via video.
Yeah. We've sort of been connected to each other for a few years, and you have just this calm demeanor. And then every once in a while you come out with just and then my past was, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So we're going to get into your life and sort of what you're doing now. We are recording this during the writer's strike. There is something that will be on Netflix that includes you. And And so we're not going to really get into what is in the show, but we're going to talk about your life and power to the people there. Hopefully I did it right. And
Sounds
we're
good.
really relaxed. So, you can cuss, you can cry. Oh, what if I get Teddy to cry?
Squeeze some tears out of me.
That's right. So tell me a little bit, first of all, where do you live? What are you doing these days? And then we'll backtrack.
Right on. Okay. So I am in Brooklyn. Let's see, how can I say this? It seems like every other decade I move back to New York. I don't know. I guess probably here to stay this time, I hope. But I went to school here for animation, and now I work editing videos and doing motion graphics for an ad agency. It's pretty cool. I moved back here from San Francisco. I lived there through the 2010s. And I just, I like working with the entertainment industry, as toxic as it can be sometimes. Thinking ad agency it's like they're our clients, so I don't work directly under them. There's a little bit of a barrier. But anyway, it's fun. Yeah. Storytelling is something I love to do. I'm a writer and an artist. So it's something that I really like working with, working on a timeline with videos and getting the timing right. And, so what I do with talking about cults and stuff is very much kind of my art too. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know how we connected, but I have a feeling it was maybe just through social media before I saw you on, is it Cults and Extreme Beliefs show? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, and on A&E.
What is the woman's name? Vargas?
Elizabeth Vargas.
Yes. I just couldn't remember because she does my true crime too. So I like that.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about your background. It's just like everyone's, y'all. It's going to be so boring. Go ahead.
This one is, I should have a boxed answer for this, but okay. Don't go on a tangent. All right, here we go.
And you're allowed to.
Okay. I don't know. Wait, sorry. Before I go into this, how much time do we have?
Forever.
Okay.
Yes.
I trust your editing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was born in Washington, D.C., actually. That's where my dad was a pastor for the Unification Church, which is, pop culture knows them as the Moonies because it's run by the Moon family from Korea, which the father believed himself to be the second coming of Jesus. And so I'm sure people might be familiar with that. And then I grew up mostly in New York. Actually, my parents were early members in the American chapter of the Unification Church because it's originally from Korea. And so I grew up from the time I was maybe about 3 to maybe 13. I lived near the Moon family in Tarrytown, New York, which is where their estate is. And we actually lived on one of their estates because my family was kind of higher up the hierarchy, not at the top, but high enough to get a good house and live near the Moon. So my parents were they worked for something called the World Mission Department. They were missionaries basically, and they would go around the world. You're familiar with the routine. It's kind of the missionaries go to the poor countries because we want to spread God's word, and it's and you want something out of it too,
right.
But from them. So anyway, but my dad work with my mom. Actually, they started in San Francisco, and then they started a family, and they were assigned to the East Coast. They basically moved wherever the Unification Church needed them to go. I mean, with cults, it's like your most major life decisions are made by the cults usually. So, it's all or nothing. So anyway, growing up in New York, it was, we lived near the Moon family, and they're pretty much, I describe them as like a mafia family, like really into guns. Sun Myung Moon's first company was like a gun company. He was like, we need to sell so many guns in America, which is why I believe he actually is a major player in the 500 million guns now in the US.
Wow.
I just, this church I grew up in, I got to go to public school. So it was kind of like Scientology, where like they want us to like gel and dissolve and like
mingle.
Yeah, exactly. And then like, talk to celebrity or try to get celebrities to endorse them and be like, hey, we're cool. We get it. We're not old school and whatever. But no, it's basically a super traditional patriarchal far-right conservative cult. Moon is very political. He's, shook hands with Nixon, Reagan, the Bushes. Anyway, Karen's managing her dog, FYI. Anyway, that's all right.
But how did your dad get into it? Like how did even that happen, that he got into the Moonies?
My dad is, I remember like some years ago, I wanted to do some like writing on the Unification Church. So it's the first time I got to know my parents before they joined the Unification Church. Because like you're only getting the cult version of your parents usually, at least for me in the cult. So, and he told me that he was basically a foster child from the time he was like maybe born until he was like 9 or 10. I think his mom had some psychological issues, and there was a lot of divorces and stuff. But anyway, so he had moved to San Francisco. He grew up in Seattle actually, and he was just going to college and hanging out with a bunch of hippie artists.
Right.
And that's when a lot of people get pulled into cults. They're just entering adulthood. They don't know what's going to happen, especially on college campuses. So my mom and my dad around the same time and in the same circumstances, at that age, they both joined. Yeah. And my mom's from Japan, so she was going to college in Japan. She got assigned to San Francisco, and that's how they met. And then we got an arranged marriage, actually. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Did they get married in one of those big mass marriage dramas that the movies do? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did. I don't know which, actually, I never found out which stadium. I guess it's just something I really don't care to like.
Right.
But I guess it would be good to know for things like this. But there was one at Madison Square Garden in 1982, but they got married in like I think it was 69, I believe. And they were, anyway.
And that was the 60s. Wedding, yeah. Like so many people wanted to be part of something, quote, bigger, especially with the Vietnam War and like all the hippies, like you were saying. So that makes a lot of sense. And colleges are like breeding grounds. I teach at a college, and it is breeding grounds for pastors. They're on campus all the time, taking kids to eat, all that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that interesting story. Actually, a good friend called me like about a year ago, and she doesn't often call. So I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And she was like, "Oh, you got to help my sister. She's in this kind of cults. Have you heard of Grace Point Church?"
Yeah, but it might be a different one because they all point to something, and where's that one out of?
It's based in, I believe, Philadelphia.
Okay.
But she was my friend in the Bay Area. So they have some recruiters in Berkeley, and like it's actually led, I believe, by a Korean leader. So it's very Asian, a lot of Asian people in that church. And so it's kind of similar to the Unification Church. but yeah, they have, and it's also similar. Like I start to look into it more and more, and like they have a bunch of pseudo names, pseudo groups, very similar. They guilt members to like donate more and more, it's very, but yeah, so I basically, when she was visiting her sister in New York, they just hung out in New York for a while. She got her to get away from that echo chamber for a while, which was probably a little hard. She was already starting to doubt a little, but I just talked to her and I listened, and and I was just like, yep, that's called blah blah. But that's one of the 8 criteria for thought reform. Yeah.
I mean, they're so clever at it because it's a learned technique that, you can take anyone by surprise. So you grew up, sort of next to in the same area as the Moons. Were they here or were they in Korea, or did they go back and forth from there to Tarrytown, or what?
Yeah, they were based here. I think that, their headquarters
didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, in New York. They just, I don't know. So their kids are all, I think most of them are just American. They're just Korean American.
Right.
And they had like music studios and like whatever they wanted, motorcycles. And it's sad because they wanted to be kids. They like want to be cool and they're riding their motorcycles around it, but they're like, again, the family from Succession cool, where they're just like cynical about life. The family's horribly dysfunctional. The parents are just super toxic. And some of the stories I heard is just, it's similar to excerpts I've heard from Mary Trump's book about the Trumps, actually. I made a post about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So did you grow up sort of knowing one of the Moon's kids?
I did. I knew them as like just the people I would see like around like the church properties in Tarrytown, because they set up shop in a lot of kind of estates around Tarrytown in Irvington, New York, which is about 30 minutes north of New York City. And so I got to know them enough to like know to try to keep my distance. And they, some of the older ones were more kind of violent and angry. And, if we were hanging out on a church property, one of them would like walk into the room and we'd all have to like stand up like soldiers and like just wait. And he's like, you can sit down. And then it's very militant. And we even sang military kind of themed songs. And like that person, if they were angry about something, they would just give us some lecture on how we have to be better. Or like they would just kind of, exercise their power and feel like they're charismatic and the popular one in the room. And it's like, hey, sing a song for me. Like literally, like this is, that was my childhood. It's like being part of this larger kind of dysfunctional family where the authority was not in my parents' hands, but in this family's hands. Yeah.
So were they, they sound like hellion preacher kids that I grew up with, but did they have like real authority, the kids, or did they just have the social authority because their parents were the Moons?
Yeah, I think it was, I think it was just their name,
Yeah.
No one liked,
exactly.
I don't think anyone liked them. They try to be, when we were kids, we had to kind of just, any time spent with them was like an honor. My friend, Elgin, who does the Falling Out podcast about like the Moonies and a lot of Moonies stories. Like one of the guests talked about hanging out with Justin Moon, who is the gun manufacturer of Kahr Arms, KAHR, which, just a lot of far right thinking along with that company. But like, he like took a road trip with him to Disneyland, and he's told all these stories. He's just like, you couldn't say anything wrong, or he would just like scold you, and everyone just has to let them do whatever they want. And they're just grumpy, like, I don't know. But then they think they're like charismatic and everyone actually loves them.
Yeah.
It's really sad, actually. Yeah.
Because people are afraid to like say anything to them because of their temper, or they'll tell their parents or whatever it is. Yeah, it sounds like a extreme version of preacher's kids. And we have a lot of those who listen to that, and they know that they were hellions. So we're not telling them anything. No.
No, this is good to know. Actually, I didn't know this.
There's a huge correlation, and they call themselves PKs, preachers' kids. And they were always the wild ones. They, if someone wanted drugs, they'll be like, I bet the preacher's kid has some, they were always the sketchy ones.
They bought a lot of cocaine with the Unification Church, human trafficking money.
Wow.
Those Moon kids. Anyway, not all of them, or actually, I don't know. I can't confirm that. But we just know that cocaine was always a big thing in their family. But, it's the rich people's drug, right? Or poor people.
It's what decade. It depends. So,
exactly.
So what were like some things that you were allowed to do and not allowed to do as part of the faith itself?
Okay, so the big no-no, because there's arranged marriage. I have to explain this first. The story of the fall of man, how like Adam and Eve sinned and they were banished, and then the rest of humanity was like fallen because of we started from sin. So the story in the Unification Church is that Eve had sex with Satan and then had sex with Adam.
Okay.
And then, so that started the disease that, and so Sun Myung Moon said he was the second coming of Jesus. Like Jesus didn't fulfill his mission. He died on the cross. He wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to have a family, which I'm like, okay. And he's like, but if you join the Unification Church, your children born into it will be free of that original sin because I will cleanse them of it. And so that was the idea. So that was their way of keeping us in. They're like, you can't have sex with anyone outside of the Unification Church. So we all had to marry each other. That's the idea. And it was like really stressed, like to the point where just between friends, just between each other, we were just like, it's called falling because the fall of man. They're like, did you fall? Or like, did you hear this person fell?
Right.
And like, it was this serious topic that in like lectures, like the room would go silent. He's like, don't fall. You know what falling is, right? Just really, really unhealthy stuff. Yeah.
It really does sort of parallel in this extreme way, the purity culture of the evangelical church, where we change the verb to stumble. Did you stumble? Or is someone a stumbling block? But I would assume you were always were you on pins and needles? Like, who are they going to choose for me? And when you man, I hope it's not Darla or what, I can't imagine like how that works.
Yeah. It's, they basically groom you to be like, you have to be willing to accept anyone. Like, so you just worry like through your adolescence where you can't really do anything and you just except worry about that. And it's just like, I no matter how ugly or whatever, like you have to, so I don't know, like it made it. So I think a lot of us just made friends that were girls in school, but like, that's it. And we never went beyond that. But some people who went a little further, just like their parents, like it's almost like they're banished. Like, it's like a big deal. At least that was back in my day. I don't know, maybe things have loosened up a little more now or like, but that was like, for sure. Like a big, like I feel like I have to go through adolescence. I had to make my own kind of adolescence and adulthood, So I feel like I'm still kind of going through it a little bit. Like,
And I think that's totally natural. Like my husband and I talk about, like we grew up in the shame-based purity culture situation too. And so the anxiety and the shame that just is instilled in you, it sticks in your body. The anxiety stays with you even as you peel away the logic,
Yeah, it is. It was traumatic, just like, I just, I've just learned about myself over the years, just like, I take a little longer, to when I'm with someone and like, if I have to tell them and I mean, I'm getting better, but like just learning to be patient with myself was a skill I had to like really learn and like, it was very necessary. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So you're growing up with the hellion kids, and you can't, I mean, obviously no stumbling and falling and all that. What were the services like? Did they have regular Sunday service or?
Yeah, they did. So there's this estate called Belvedere in Tarrytown, New York. And that's where we had our church services. It's just this big, beautiful estate. I think the Seagram's Empire used to be there.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, like the headquarters. I think that's where they had meetings or something. I looked into it one day. But yeah, so we had our services there. So every Sunday morning at 5 a.m, like to symbolize, I guess, like dawn in a new week, we would have to do something called pledge, where we would do a full bow to the floor 3 times to like a picture of Reverend and Mrs. Moon, and read like a pledge of our devotion to them, and then pray and stuff. And after that, sometimes they would have, or I think just every time, they would have like a really early morning like sermon at like 6 a.m. or something. And so, it was just, a theme in a lot of cults is like sleep depravity.
Right.
A lot of cults did this, and they just look down on sleep as like weak or whatever, or like, because they want us to like work all the time or whatever. But so that was optional. And I remember when I started to choose that, like, other older Moonie kids were like, yeah, go Teddy, like doing the right thing. And it's like, so, I mean, this is before the regular church service that I believe started at 10 a.m.
Okay.
So like sometimes, it would be that long, be like a 4-hour lecture. Sometimes it would be coked up Hyojin, who's like the oldest of the Moon family, who sadly died, many of us believe, due to a hemorrhage caused by his cocaine use. But he would just rant about like, oh, we're going to kill Satan, that motherfucker. And like, you knew that he was just angry about his life, but he turned it into like some spiritual words, to make it sound. Yeah, it's just really sad story. And then it was just, regular church service. We had like a holy song book, and, we just kind of took old Christian hymns, and I think just acquired those.
Stuck the name Moon where God was.
Actually, no, it was just, we said like Father, or, stuff like that. But there were, so there was like the holy songs, and then there were like the not as holy songs, which were just kind of like, I don't know, like a little less, I guess, like an appetizer. And these were just, those were the pop songs from like the hippie era that we changed the words. So I guess you guys did that too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, that's the whole thing, is that at least in evangelical Christianity, God is the God of creation, God of creativity. He's the one that gives us all this original stuff. But we were always borrowing from the secular world. We were always taking songs and changing them. And if they made movies, well, we're going to make a movie. Oh, they do rap. Yeah, we're going to do some terrible rap. It was never, original. So was it sounds almost a bit of a violent overtone upbringing, like the church and evangelicalism and Southern Baptist is very into, not yelling from the pulpit too much, maybe getting people roused up, but it wasn't, fire and brimstone. It sounds to me like the entire family and some of the things they were into was a sort of violent, situation.
Yeah. Whenever I see any kind of reports about North Korea and the authoritarianism there, Sun Myung Moon was actually born in what is now North Korea before the division. So I think he carried a lot of that kind of authoritarian attitude. And, in his life, like he was tortured in prison at one point. At least one podcast attributed that to his like wanting to be a messiah. It's like, when you're in a powerless situation and the trauma makes you like, that's usually why cult leaders become cult leaders, or narcissists. Yeah, same thing. But yeah, so it was kind of a thing. And I think, I had heard that he would hit his kids. And one thing I had heard, again, this is all just kind of, I wasn't there, but people who were friends with the Moons have told me this, that the mom of the Moon family, Pak Jahan, who is supposedly this peaceful mother who took over after her husband died in 2012, in the Family Federation for World Peace, as it's called now, she would have her sons fight each other, and like the loser, just to teach them dominance. Right. And the loser got peed on by the winner.
What?
Yeah. And like, it's disturbing. Interesting. Yeah. Very disturbing. And I had heard a podcast about the history of Trump. Can I mention podcast names, or I don't know?
Yeah. I think we're good.
Okay. It's just called Cult Podcast. Actually, these two comedians run it. It's great. What was it? They had talked so they were doing a series on the Trump family, and he has like a long line of like cowardly narcissists, like all the way back to the mid 1800s. Yeah. So they said that Trump would actually make new cadets in military school fight each other for his entertainment. So, and then I had heard also from a church property where a lot of families were living in like a compound pretty much called Jacob House in Tarrytown, that the Moon kids would make the kids there fight each other for their own entertainment. And it's sad if you can imagine like kids just like crying and throwing punches at each other, like they don't want to do it. It's really disturbing. Yeah.
It's very disturbing, and it's very sort of typical, like what we're seeing today, and a lot of the stringent, more militant Christian nationalism, at least, is all the imagery that they take from the Bible with, the sword of the Lord, we're fighting in battle, we're putting on the breastplate. The Bible, they didn't have a lot of stuff going on, but like battles. So their context, people are so desperate to like be fighters, especially little men, who are just, it's scary.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had heard I forgot what article I read, but as one person put it, because there were actually a lot of missionaries who went to Korea. Like, if you notice, a lot of Korean people are Christian. Like Christianity is big there.
My husband was born in Busan because his parents are missionaries.
Oh, wow.
In South Korea.
There you go. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so I don't need to explain that to you, but
you're right. There's a lot.
Yeah. Some people had said that, Sun Myung Moon is a product of the colonization there.
Right.
And I feel like there's also a lot of like Indian gurus who I see in cult news, like who are like these like God men, as they call them. And, I feel like maybe that has to do with like the British colonizers or whatever, it's just, it just makes like it raises the bar really high to like what people think they have to, like innocent people, indigenous people have to like aspire to in order to like live comfortably again. And then it's all or nothing. And it's like the capitalism thing, and it's just, it's this horrible cycle that needs to really be talked about more, I feel like.
It does. And the like maybe genuine pride of their own culture, but to raise it up to a certain standard, there's always that leaning into Western culture that has the money and the fame, and it has to bleed over for you to get attention, I guess. All right. So you're living in Tarrytown, scared you're going to get married off. Excuse me. And were all your friends in the Moonies? Is it sort of hang out with them, be acquaintances with non-Moonies, but don't hang out with them too much? Is that how it went?
Yeah, I feel like everything I say, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's like our,
I know your life.
Like our
I know
church.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very similar. It was like, I just remember looking at the clock just every Friday, waiting to like, have it be the weekend so I could go to my Mooney friends' houses, because they were like the only people I was allowed to be myself around. And, at school, it was extra, like why I feel like very situated to be a whistleblower is because growing up near the Moons, like everyone in that town knew about the Moons. So like we were the Boo Radleys of like that town, and like, even in the news in like the 80s and stuff. So I was very paranoid of the world. And what was I going to say? Oh, so just, on top of like people finding out you're a Moonie in school, like they get like more defensive because they're like in close proximity with the Boo Radleys, whereas I'd heard later, like, and even if you just cross the bridge to New Jersey, like people were little more chill. They weren't as scared of like the Moons coming around on a church property. And I don't know. But so, yeah, it was pretty intense in like Tarrytown and Irvington for sure.
Wow. And so when Reverend Moon died, the mother took over. How did that go? Were people fine with it? Or are they like, oh, it's going to go downhill now, or what?
I mean, some people had predicted it would be like Game of Thrones, I mean, that toxic family, everyone wants to take the throne, so that's exactly what happened. Mrs. Moon, she wants to take over in this patriarchal, misogynist as hell cult. And, so some of the sons had issues with that. One of them started, what I spoke about on the A&E show, Sean Moon, who was someone I knew to be a particular bully. He was the one who was like making kids fight each other at church properties and stuff, whereas some of his other brothers were actually a little more lenient. But he started his gun cult with like AR-15s and stuff. And, there's another guy named Preston Moon who, he kind of took the business empire. He, after Sun Moon died, I think he immediately went to these businesses, the Washington Times, which is one of them, which is a paper that actually it rolled into OAN, behind Herring Broadcasting and Washington Times. Those two together is OAN. Like OAN is the combination of those two. I mean, they birthed that. He just showed up at that business, and the Moons are the largest distributor of sushi in America. I did not know. Oh, you didn't know that? No, it's called True World Foods. If you Google, if you look up the New York Times article, The Untold Story of Sushi in America, there's a whole, it's like almost like an animated kind of like article about the Moons and everything. He just showed up to these like, business, these large corporations, and he used his like mafioso intimidation. He's like, sign this document now, because they could do that and no one could question them. Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. And we definitely want to get into and explain to people now I can't remember what they're called, the Rod of the Lord, the son
Rod of
Sean.
Iron.
Yes.
Yeah, Rod of Iron
So
Ministries.
Let's talk about Sean a little bit. So he decided he's going to start his own cult that is totally away from the Moonies. Are they connected at all? Or
it's, I think connected, I guess, I imagine it might be like the show Succession, where everyone knows that like their empire, like they have to work together sometimes to keep their empire going.
Okay.
So gotcha. That's how I imagine it. But yeah, he is competing against his mother. It's him, Sean Moon and Justin Moon. They work together, and they basically, they just kind of cater to like the far right in pop culture more. They rub elbows with. There's a photo with Sean Moon and Don Jr. because Don Jr. is at one of the Rod of Iron events. There's like, what's his name? Joey Gibson spoke at one of his events. Steve Bannon spoke at Rod of Iron Ministries event. Yeah, I think he just gives them money. So he's more like the fringe Moon. Like the Splinter Group's more on the fringe. I mean, the whole thing's on the fringe, but I guess Mrs. Moon's better at covering it up. So she's like the high roller, getting Mike Pompeo to speak at one of her events, or like Donald Trump to speak at one of her events. And they all read a script that says like the Moons are wonderful people, more or less. And I'm just like, This is where we are. Yeah.
It is. So, Sean, if people haven't seen, is his church the one that people see pictures of where they're holding the AR-15s?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put a picture of that on our website. And I mean, when I first saw that, I was aghast. I was like, what is happening?
Right.
And I think they were like, it's Sunday is the blessings of the guns. Bring yours in. I don't know what it was, but it was horrifying to just see a picture of people in the congregation holding their guns like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's actually what got me to, when I saw those pictures. And, there's people who still get emails from the Unification Church who like left the church, and they're just, so we get tips about like the events and stuff happening. And so they said they were going to have, this blessing. And I called local schools and news and everything in that town around Newfoundland, Pennsylvania. And I was like, do you know this is happening? I wasn't trying to stir up trouble or be like, there's going to be a mass shooting or say anything I didn't believe was true. Because I know him. I know Sean Moon enough to know that I think he wants to give like a peaceful, kind of vibe, or he's doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
But like he's really a softie. Like he's very fragile person. And I think maybe most people could see that just by what he, clads himself with. But so I know he wasn't going to do anything, but I just wanted people to know that, this, I think more than anything, I wanted people to just see like, these are the types of people that or this is what they value. Like they're imagining this war, like many cults, like, Charles Manson had the Helter Skelter, like, oh, war is going to happen. And is it Shoko Sahara, the Shinriko guy? Yeah, he was like, oh, there's a war that's going to happen. So like this feels like that too, like they're gearing up. So, I just wanted people to know, and anyway, he is. Yeah. Huh?
I remember you being interviewed in front of it, or like outside. I guess the news had showed up and asked you. And I don't know where I saw that, whether it was in a documentary or it made it to the national news or something. Your whole message to me is just like, this is going on. People need to know this is going on. And if you didn't know this one's going on, you don't know about the hundreds of others going on either. But it's very startling to just see something like that and know that at any time they're so brainwashed that they could do something absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's not as much the lectures and the like. I don't think Sean Moon is going to command any kind of violent action. It's more that I know that there's a lot of mentally ill people who will join cults because it makes them feel accepted. And then, maybe that gets passed on to their kids or something like that. And, case in point, there was a guy named Nicholas Skolstad who was living in, I believe he's from Croton Harmon and in Dobbs Ferry, New York. These are both just north of New York City. He was found with a kill list, and he was part of this Rod of Iron Ministries. Wow. And he had like a psychological break, and he said he was Jesus or something. And he crashed into like a Metro North car or some kind of transportation company car, and just started yelling things. And he had a kill list, and he had the Make America Great Again hat, and he always wore fatigues, and he had these really trolling tweets. If you looked at his Twitter, I think he's still in jail. I don't know, but it's just that I'm trying to warn people that things are going to pop like that. Or, another perfect example is Shinzo Abe's assassination. That was a disgruntled is putting it too lightly, a person whose life was terrorized by the Unification Church, and his mom being convinced, when she was grieving from her husband's death, the Unification Church approached her, caught her in a vulnerable moment, and just really got deep into her, and she just gave all of her money to it. And, you know, they couldn't even afford cancer treatment payments with his brother. So, you know, he just went nuts, and he made his own gun to kill Shinzo Abe, because Shinzo Abe did have ties to the Unification Church, and he did have a relationship with them that went generations before him, actually.
Right. And that's, I mean, I think of January 6th, you get enough people who happen to have anger issues, something loose up there, and it doesn't matter if someone directly says something, doesn't say it. You get a group mentality of fear and anger, and it just goes wild. Now, Sean's church, fringe break-off church, are they the ones that have bought land in Texas and Tennessee?
Yes. Yeah, they have. Okay. They bought land in Tennessee. So I don't know what they were doing in Texas. I think they go wherever the gun laws are looser and where they can find like far right allies. Yeah.
Right.
So, in Tennessee, they bought this land. I think there's like a mountain there or some kind of hill. So in the mainstream Unification Church run by his mom, Akjahan Moon, there's a healing center on a mountain called Chungpyeong in Korea. And they have this ritual. It's another like what the fuck thing in the Unification Church. They have ritual beatings, or just you slap yourself and you slap other people to rid yourself of microscopic evil spirits in your body. Like that's the idea. And it's like, even if you have like mental illness, like if you have a child who's mentally challenged, they will get slapped, and they believe that this is better than going to a hospital or going to psychiatric care. So so Sean Moon, like I remember catching a video one of my fellow activists sent me, and at some point in the video, he's like, you know, we have a mountain, blah, blah, blah. It's bigger than the one in Chungpyeong, and we're going to da-da-da. And, you know, it's like, oh,
we're going to slap harder and more. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because like I found out, I brought this up in other interviews before. Scientology has something called body thetans, where they believe you have tiny microscopic aliens in your body that you have to get rid of. And so like, I was like, wait, that sounds exactly like the Chungpyeong philosophy of like little tiny evil spirits you got to slap out of your body. And like, oh, I guess they just like, you know, they learn from each other what brings in the cash. Yeah,
exactly. They figure out what people are susceptible to and say, this worked there. So you're in this gun. Well, you didn't have too many guns, just in the regular Moons, I guess. But you're growing up, you're living, you're slapping yourself, you're, you know, all this fun.
Luckily, that only happens there. It wasn't everywhere.
Oh, you have to go to the mountain. Oh, special occasion slapping. All right. So, and believe me, it's when you get on the outside of things and you look back at like what you did and thought is normal, it is so baffling. And that's how I ended up actually getting out of Christianity, as being a missionary and trying to look at the Bible with an outsider's view, and started going, what? But so tell me how you began to work your way out of it, if that's a good place to catch your story.
Yeah. So, you know, when I was 13, we actually were told by the church to move to our father's hometown to spread the witnessing effort. And so my father's hometown is Seattle. So I moved to Seattle in 1992 with my family, and, you know, which was pretty cool because then like grunge and alternative was big. I was like, sweet. Yeah. So yeah, I was in New York for the birth of MTV, and then Seattle for like grunge and alternative. Like,
right.
Cool.
That's
so
great.
You can imagine I'm a big music fan. But yeah, I mean, that was like a perk, but there's a lot of other things. So we were told to move to our father's hometown. So we just, you know, my family was just kind of like, what? Like, this is the only community we know and are allowed to trust. And now we're moving to like another community where, okay, there'll be church members, but anyway, but they were all younger than us. The New York families were older. So anyway, that was a time where before I go more into that, I learned later that Sun Myung Moon, his direction to move everyone to their father's hometown was actually a way of getting his congregation to spread out because there was like a lawsuit on the horizon.
Right. Okay.
Every major decision he's made is usually because of that. I have learned over the years. Anyway, so that's a fun fact. So in Seattle, like my family, I think, and I learned that a lot of families actually, my dad had saw how the church became more powerful and corrupt over the years. Both my parents, they'd worked in the higher offices, and
there you go. Yeah.
In the 90s, they, without having to look over their shoulder as much near the headquarters in New York, they just kind of slowly drifted away. We all just kind of drifted away. And I think it was really hard for us raised in it because, again, it was the only community we were allowed to trust. And like our parents don't know what that's like and I tried to tell them and they just doesn't register and they think we're blaming them. And, I just don't even bring up stuff with the church that's conflicting anymore with them because it's such different lives, the first and second generation. Yeah. So, we just had to kind of learn to be quote unquote outside people. And it's still something that, it's like some people will be like, oh, in so many words, can't you just get over it? Or, just let it go. That was the past. And it's like,
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're raised if you're like raised and your most developmental, vulnerable, formative years are like planted with all this, hocus pocus and like fears of the world, like, no, there's no going back to normal. It's something you have to deal with your whole life. Yeah. Right. There's no going back to normal. There's entering normal slowly and
learning normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because your parents, they had like mental and bodily autonomy to choose to go in it. And those of us born into that society, especially, I just think about giving up bodily autonomy, even though I was too scared to do anything that would make people stumble. It was, you were handing over a ruling of everything you did to something, and you didn't know how to like own it yourself. It takes for fucking ever, and I hate it, but it's also sort of fun and freeing later. So your whole family was sort of edging its way out, do you think, in Seattle? Were there any big questions like maybe he's not Jesus? I mean, how did that leap happen mentally for you all?
I think all of us in the who grew up in the Unification Church, like, that is a big moment because that's what everything is rooted in. So your whole identity, your whole community, everything that bonds you. Yeah. So my two older brothers kind of drifted in their own way, I guess. And then my older sister, she kind of took me under her wing because, like, in the Unification Church, it's a lot of, my mom, she had a lot of motherly instincts, and she grew up with a good mom, so she was a good mom, but she was also at the mercy of the Unification Church, so she had to be absent for certain parts of our lives, and like. Anyway, so my sister kind of took me in, and I think she felt an obligation to be like the good daughter. She was the only daughter in the family. So she decided to do the 1-year mission after high school, which is optional, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like the Mormon mission thing where they go door to door, and except for us, it was mostly labor trafficking. It was like maybe 75-80% labor trafficking, where you get in a van and you sell trinkets door to door around the country. You just travel. And like, this is the lifeblood of the Unification Church and all of its crazy businesses. And so she did that for a year, and she convinced me to do it. And then we both did it. She feels bad about it, but I'm like, no, get some distance. And it's just like, we had no choice. Like, it wasn't our fault. I did that. And after that, it was interesting because my parents, like having been away from it for so long, like by this time, maybe about 10 years, almost 10 years. When I came back, they saw that I was kind of more indoctrinated and, so I think they wanted to give me they wanted to pull the Band-Aid off, and they're like, if we just want to let you know, if you don't want to go to the arranged marriage, then you don't have to. And we don't know if Sun Myung Moon's the Messiah. Wow. And I was just, part of me will always be mad at them about that. Cause I'm like, wow, like that is the worst moment you could have, so you could have been a little smoother.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was just a lot of cognitive dissonance. My sister, again, we had both done that frontline program, and she was like, we have to save our family. And I remember her saying that, and but we didn't really know what the answer was. It was the first time our parents weren't in line with this higher authority that was the root of our whole society. So yeah. But just over time, it just took a long time, a lot of messing up as a young adult after that, and saying or doing cringy things here and there. I was always trying to be a nice kid, but especially when it came to girls and women, I was, I was just misogynist things coming out of my mouth and stuff, really thoughtless, because that's how Sun Myung Moon talked. He just talked about women like toys, and that they had to be pretty and perfect Barbie dolls for us every day. So anyway, but it's been a long road and a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually, just the cognitive dissonance started, I guess, that distance away from the little headquarters gave you all a mental distance too, do you think, to start letting things sort of fall away a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, we did kind of start to feel a little more empowered. My oldest brother was the only one who actually would go to the Moon's estate and hang out with those kids, before it took a few tries to realize, one of them almost drowned him in a pool. She was being playful and just treated him like a toy, because that's how, that's how sociopathic these kids are. And he was like, he didn't want to go back after that. And I think he felt like he had seen things and could make a better informed decision about it. So I think he was kind of leading he was like, we should stop doing pledge service at 5 a.m. on Sundays, bowing to this picture.
Yeah.
And I remember we were so Hyojin, who was, again, the one who passed away, he has a book written about him called In the Shadow of the Moons by Nansa Kong, his ex-wife, who just talks about how he beat her and she tried to take away his cocaine one day and stuff like that, just really, really crazy mafia stuff. He would sometimes beat up some of the kids, and, Preston Moon would also beat up just whoever wasn't doing exactly what they wanted him to do, or,
right.
And so when we were in Seattle, me and my brothers would be like, oh man, if he tried that on me, I would totally mess him up. And it's just 3,000 miles away.
Yeah. That bravery comes out. And that's what I talk about a lot, about when there is distance, some kind of physical thing. And that's what's going on in the evangelical church now after COVID and after Trump, when people are like, I can't go back to my church anymore because they're not masking, or they're, talking about Trump. It's that distance that does such a huge service to people. They can actually start thinking for themselves a little bit.
I think it was, before you hold that thought, there's another activist named Matthew Brown. And I think he was in a cult, I believe it was 30 years or so, or was it 10, 30? I don't know. But he said during the pandemic, he had to go home. I think after a few days or a week, he was just totally out. Yeah. Wow. Just enough distance. But
yeah, it is. So were any of your family still part of the Unification Church?
No, but I think my parents, it's a delicate situation. I think in any cult, probably the parents are going to, they believe they believe that it was their choice. It's more complex than that, but they are like, no, we own it. It was our, decision and whatever. And like, I think having made that choice more or less gives them a certain pride in that choice. And so, and they were working in the head offices of the cult. And my parents happened to, not everyone, but they happened to grow up very blue collar working class. So joining this like ultra wealthy cult where they worked in this building called the New Yorker with a big sign that says New Yorker on it, like in the middle of, downtown New York, was this incredible rush. And I think they have so much pride in like what they did and like, oh, we did good things. And we were going to these holy events and, so I think for them, it's way harder to, I don't think they'll even call it a cult, but whereas us kids are like, we didn't decide, we didn't choose it. So I think it was like the decision to not be part of it was easier, but again, it's not something you just walk away from in your life's normal. Like there's still a lot of strings attached. Like it was a culture that raised us. So there has to be some peace kept with that, in order to like just function as a person and as an adult with like more memories of childhood, where you could get them. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And the good things that you probably learned like we did, it's not 100% bad. And that can be confusing at some parts when you're starting to come out of it. But later you can, be thankful, or I am, for some certain things, even if it was just, keeping me safe. And I always had fun at church. Like that's something I'm thankful for because I was a lonely, quiet kid. So I wouldn't have had any kind of socialization. So now tell me, as an adult, what is part of your mission or your activism when it comes to the Moonies and to cults?
It's interesting how it's an artist, like I went to school and everything. I'm always looking for my next muse, my next subject to like focus on. And it's interesting. I was maybe 30, living in San Francisco at the time. I was just listening to like this rotation of comedy excerpts on iTunes at the time. And this one guy, I forgot his joke. He was like, he's talking about how his father died and how he found out. Like, police called him and he said, like, your father got in a car accident, and he told them that he died. And then he said his first question was, how was the car? And so like, that was a joke.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of blown away. I was like, and I wish I knew who it was. I don't know who it was, but I was like, wow, if that guy can bring his deepest, darkest secret, this vulnerable, painful thing on stage and turn it into comedy, like, what can I do? What's my deepest, darkest secret? And I'd never put that together, like to turn this into art or anything. Like, because to me, it was always like, oh, it's just, it's something it's not interesting, and, nobody cares. But so I decided to look into it some more. And it's interesting because originally I wanted to talk about it in a way like what we were just talking about, like, oh, actually, I have a lot of warm memories and there was good things. It's not like what the media says, and we're not a bunch of cult zombies and stuff like that. But it only took a few weeks of critical research. Like it just, just turn the dial a little bit and be like, just view it critically, to realize that absolutely everything the news had said and their take was completely true. Right. And everything just flipped. Yeah. Yeah.
And so what you do with your spare time or whatever is mostly, do you write? Do you speak on this? Do you? People contact you? Are you the ex-Moonie go-to person?
I think I have kind of become the poster boy for ex-Moonies, and I don't know how much my parents know because I just hide stuff from them on Facebook, and maybe someone
do it. Yeah.
But sometimes I think that someone's feeding them what I'm saying. But if they find out, I'm like, all right, sure. I'm not going to show them directly, but if they need to know, okay. yeah, it's more for them than for me. Like, they're actually in QAnon now. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's like losing parents. Hopping. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it kind of is. Yeah. But they also, they try to protect themselves from joining any other kind of group. So they don't completely immerse themselves in it. They just have wacky beliefs that pop up every now and then, like whack-a-mole. But anyway, yeah, I think I started to write. I'm trying to think of the first things I did. I think probably the first thing I did, the first big thing, was when Trump was running for president. One of my friends who's also a fellow ex-Moonie activist, her name's Jen Kiaba. She's a photographer. She was like, "Oh yeah, I've written op-eds for Huffington Post." She's like, "Yeah, just write to Ariana Huffington and just give like a my personal story thing. It's easy." And I was like, "Really?" It's like, "Yeah." At the time, they actually wanted like as many writers as they could have, but then they realized they had to taper back. But so like I got in the door, proposing my article idea. It was actually another article, but then my second article was about comparing Trump to the Moons, and it was the Huffington Post, so I guess it kind of went around. And and then Vice called me one day and they wanted to interview me for an article for something. And my first video interview was actually an advertisement for a video game. There's a video game called Far Cry 5, and there's a cult in the game, and that's like, it's like a first-person shooter.
Wow.
But yeah, it's like this Jim Jones kind of cult leader guy, and you have to go in, and I don't know exactly the story. I heard later that it's like, they tried to make it all deep and meaningful and informative about cults, but it's actually just another shoot 'em up game. And I'm like, I made it sound like it was better.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, that was my first. It was with Uproxx, the media agency. So they had me in the middle of like this desert area in LA with like some scraps around. It looked like, the abandoned Jim Jones like compound area. Yeah. So I just talked about cults. Yeah. For the game. Yeah. But then from there. Actually, that happened the same time as the A&E thing. So it was funny. I was nervous about the Uproxx interview, and I was so focused on that the A&E thing was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just do that after, whatever." And like, but no, I mean, when I was there, especially on the lawn of like, or right outside the gate of that, gun cults, it was pretty nerve-wracking. Yeah,
I bet.
Like to stay at the hotel where like all these other members, there were some members scattered around the country, and they all had these big, boxy suitcases because that was their guns. So I was in this hotel with like all these people walking around with what I knew were guns, like these families. So yeah, it was pretty crazy making.
That is a little weird, but I don't know anything about games. That is wild. So if you could tell people anything, everyone thinks they're never going to join a cult and that they always will be able to spot it. What are things that you try and get across to people when it comes to that?
It's so interesting because just today, a friend of a friend wanted to take was thinking about having her kids join this school in California, and it was like brought to you by a foundation. It was like in the woods, and there was like a guru behind it. How do I put this? But yeah, usually if someone is asking me about if this is a cult or whatever, like, or if they're already involved in it, they've been through a little bit of the initial process. My go-to thing I send them is the 8 Criteria for Thought Reform by Robert J. Lifton.
Okay.
He wrote a book called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. It was about how in Mao's China, he brainwashed like people who went to jail there, like from other countries or even domestically. And it was like this very nationalist propaganda that they were just like, force fed pretty much. And so from that study and from him studying these subjects after they were released, he came up with 8 criteria for thought reform. And one of them's like milieu control. One of them's like dispensing of existence, creating like fake miracles and, convincing everyone it's true. There's all these like kind of consistent methods. So yeah, 8 criteria for thought reform. I don't know. I just, if there's any kind of like, just thinking that there's one character that's like really, or I don't know. I guess I don't have like a canned answer for this either, but I guess go with your gut is a good thing.
Yeah. And I think, what you said, like there's no canned answer actually is pretty profound because it is so subtle and things can become cults without people even having a leader that is purposefully doing it also. It can come out of narcissism. It can come out of thinking they're doing something good in and I think that's what's so fascinating about all of it, and hearing people who were in cults, grew up in cults. And of course, a lot of our listeners grew up in churches that had cultish personalities.
Right.
They're not cults, they're not closed, they're not all that, but everyone's beginning to see how if that leader left, either people would follow him to another church or the church would go down. Like they start to see that there are small things where they're more leader focused and belief focused, and they could easily fall into cultish behavior themselves. I know I did, which is yay. But now, as you know, I think you and I might have talked about it. I want to start a cult. I'm in it for the money. I'm in it because I want one of the houses off Zillow, so yeah, my dog doesn't want me to do it, but I'm just trying to like figure out my first foray into it. And I don't know if it's going to be faked miracles.
Okay, so you're going to take notes.
I know, but we'll work on this later.
Charles Manson.
I'll let you in on the ground level. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. What a privilege. And to tell me right up that it's a cult. No cult does that.
That is going to be the cult of it, is that it says it's going to be
wow. Except for Unicron. Anyway, there's this one person who says it's a benevolent cult. But anyway, what was I saying? No,
you would say Charles Manson.
Oh, Charles Manson. Yeah. He took like classes from the guy who wrote The Road Less Traveled and he took notes.
Yeah.
It's on like, it's interesting.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I think these days the UFO route seems to be working for some people so now, since that's in the news, I'll jump on that maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, well, astrology is predicted to really ascend, to use a word. Yeah, it's predicted to become really trendy in the years to come. And I actually, it was interesting the reasons why, because this is what I deduced from why cults get big when they do. I think it usually has to do with the economy. It's like when there's like a wealth gap and there's inflation's rising like crazy. It's pre-war Germany. Like this is what I was afraid of. It's like, well, shoot, Kaiser Wilhelm was compared to Trump because Kaiser Wilhelm kind of set the conditions for someone like Hitler to rise up, and he fucked the economy and everything. So like after Trump, like whoever's next, could be like a Hitler guy. I'm not saying like, I don't think America would allow the degree, but
who knows?
Thinking.
That's the thing. We're in this crazy slippery slope. But I totally agree with you because we covered a Jesus in Russia. He's in jail now. Shock. But it was the economy. It was the government. It was the timing. It was the fall of the USSR when people then were like, oh, I get to experience and explore spirituality now because it's not being repressed, but I don't know how to. And I'm used to a very regimented do this, don't do that was in the old USSR. And I'm looking for structure. And so here comes this guy saying, well, I'm Jesus. I'll give you a structure. We'll all live together. I'll take over that part in you that's missing, that needs someone to tell you what to do, and offer that spirituality you were looking for. And so it was just like this perfect storm in history. And I agree. I think I am seeing a lot of things on TikTok, on different places that are very cult-like, that are either related to spirituality or, this sort of psychological manifestation,
right?
Businessy stuff, even. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I listened to a whole podcast episode about that, about the kind of, or like unlicensed therapists or whatever, like the influencer therapists who are not therapists, or just like people who give you these life advice, and people, don't search their background. And, there's like Teal Swan and stuff like that. So, but yeah, they actually gave some good advice. They said something like, if you see in the comments that these people are praising this person, like, oh my God, you're the best person. Right. Like, that's like a bad sign. Like, you don't want someone who's too hocus pocus. Like the therapists I follow, people just will tell their own stories. I don't see as much like, you're the best person in the world,
Exactly.
So that's what I look for now,
Exactly. I look for people that other people don't like. Now, I do know what you're saying. Absolutely. And I'm scared to even on some of those comment, like, this is totally wrong, because you do see those comments and those people will come after you. And, but we covered Teal Swan too. And it's anyone can fall into these things, and there's going to be new and different ways that we hadn't thought of, new groups that we're not going to realize are groups. Hopefully everyone can just follow their gut, or join our cult. I feel that's the safest.
That's interesting, because like, cult interventionists I've learned from, they've talked about how like a good way to counter, let's say you have a parent in QAnon or some kind of extreme, someone close to you in some kind of extreme group, and you feel like it's not good. They say that, the best thing to do is, you don't want to like take away things from them. Like imagine if they're just like roots, like you want to kind of just introduce them to, it's best not to be confrontational, like right on the nose. It's best to like take them out to a bar or a party or somewhere where they can just see that people are friendly and nice and just want to have a good time, get some drinks in them, and like, just like chill out. Like that was actually one of the hardest things for me, was like, I thought I had all this specialness, and then I got it when I was like an indoctrinated kid, and I was like, I'm a soldier for God kind of person. And the hardest thing was just to accept that, nope, like, I'm just a guy who likes to have drinks and like talk about things I like in like pop culture or something. Like I wasn't special anymore. Yeah.
I know.
So.
And I made a video about like that, like, because in church, even if you couldn't sing, they let you be in the choir. And even if you couldn't teach, they'd say, teach Sunday school. And you were born for such a time as this, you're chosen, you're special, and you get out into the real world and you're average. And it is something to deal with. And I call us the turkey bacon of the world, because like we thought we were the real thing. And we come out and we see, things are way different. But it also does take a lot of pressure off, because I was supposed to help save the world and bring it to God's kingdom. So I don't have that, just all that there.
What I've noticed is that women are more like, oh yeah, fuck that shit. Like they're more quick because it was patriarchal as hell. Like it was shitting on women, and it was Moon and a lot of the men would take credit for a lot of the shit women made. It's like from biblical times, basically, since that's the book they're trying to follow. And men were more like, wait, but I'm special. I think it's harder for guys.
It really is. And we're seeing so many of that in the younger men and the young Christian men who are now combining that with weightlifting. It's this whole masculinity stuff. But they're losing their place of hierarchy before they even get to it. And I think that's a big threat. But
I've seen the like pastor bros like pumping iron on stage while teaching and stuff.
It's like, what? Like Jesus didn't anyway. Well, thanks for solving the world with me, Teddy. It's finally good to just chat with you face to face and solidify our cult and our ongoing business venture. But I really learned a lot. I didn't know that the Moonies were the biggest purveyors of sushi, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we didn't even get to. But I'm sure Teddy probably talks about it on Netflix or A&E or places like that.
Yeah. I don't know if you just Teddy Hose Moonies. Yeah, you'll find stuff.
Put in Teddy Hose Moonies. You're going to find them. And we'll put everything on our website and our social media and all that. But come back anytime. And thank you for doing this tonight. And say hey to New York for me.
Will do. Yeah. It's always cool seeing your TikTok videos. And I appreciate you put a lot of effort into it. Like, I'm like, wow, she does this like every day. Like, anyway, I appreciate it. And then I
get burnout, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's great. Like, and you're witty and it's like pretty chill and you make great points. So, and you're a teacher. I actually didn't know that until today.
Yeah. I haven't been teaching in the classroom for a while, but I still do it online and stuff like that. But awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to go take care of the 15-year-old one-eyed dog here who is staring at the wall. He doesn't know. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Yeah. Great talking to you. Thank you so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.